So as we think about today, keep that in mind. How prepared do you feel? And hopefully we'll be giving you some solutions, some tactics, some different ways of looking at things, so you can start to be better prepared. So we're going to have a survey. And what I want to do is get everyone's perspective on the future. So you're going to have a minute to answer 3 poll questions. I want you to rate your level of agreement from strongly disagree to strongly agree. There's a drop-down menu. Dana, if we can pop up the survey and ask everyone to put down your first impressions. Don't mull over this for too long. And we'll give folks a minute to respond, and then we'll talk about the results.
Absolutely. I have launched the poll, so hopefully you all see the poll. And yes, you do. The numbers are coming in quite quickly now. Thank you. All right. Still coming in a little bit. Thank you so much for all of your participation today, everyone. Here we go. About 15 more seconds or so, everyone, if you can go ahead and get that taken care of. Awesome. Okay, quick countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Jay. Number 1, I am concerned about the future. Agree. Highest percentage, 72%.
So can you click on share the results?
I sure can. Apologies. Here we go. Share the results. All right. Now everybody can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, this is pretty reflective of the environment. About being concerned about the future is 88%. That's real high. So if we scroll down, who feels they're prepared and ready for the future?
It's interesting. Prepared and ready for the future. 48% said they agree with that, and 40% were sort of in the neither agree nor disagree. And then the next one is 12% that disagree.
Yeah, so similar to the conference board, 52% are kind of in the unsure or don't camp. Obviously, we're making some progress over the last couple of years. I think that agree number would have been lower going back 2 or 3 years, but COVID has taught many people lessons. And when it comes to whether or not your company is, the level of agreement drops quite a bit more, with only 20% in agreement, and I guess 80% are neither agree nor disagree, or don't think their company's prepared. All right, we can close that. So obviously this is a topic we need to be paying attention to. Sorry about that. So, when we think about disruptions, I want to show you a short video, and then we're going to talk about what happened. So if we look at that, if you're a snail on the rock or a crab underneath the water, your life just got turned upside down. You saw how the impact spread out. However, if you were maybe 50 feet away from this, because I was dropping a rock into a tidal pond, and if you were 50 feet away, you might have saw a splash. If you were further away, you saw nothing. So the impact of the disruption, how big it is, how important it is very often a perspective of where you are and how that impact spreads. And there are secondary and tertiary effects at all levels. So, when we think about disruptions, sorry, I just lost control of my mouse here. Here we go. Okay, so when we're dealing with disruptions, leaders have a choice to make. So we know we can't choose our circumstances, but we can choose how we respond. And really the choice is, will you be a captain or will you be a captive? A captain, and we have the picture of Sully Sullenberger here. Now, when he took off and the bird strike blew out both engines, he didn't throw up his hands and say, oh my God, we're going to die. He knew he had to take charge. He knew he had some control over his destiny, and he acted on it. On the other hand, if you're a captive, you're going to say things like, this is all out of my control. We don't know what to do. I'm the victim of my circumstances. And that's not a good place to be. So you want to take that agency. You want to be the captain. You want to take charge of your destiny. So leaders have to do a couple of things. So the first is about see, think, and do differently. So in terms of see differently, I want you to take a look at this picture. And in chat, put down if you see anything in particular, anything that sticks out. So any comments?
Yes, some great comments. Anadri is seeing reflection, as is Donna Moore. I see water. I see horizon. I see nature. Anybody else want to share? There is something in the water. There is something in the water. That's right, Jonathan, Donna. What's in the water? What's in there? Wellness. Awesome. I love that, Ashley. There's something strange below the surface, said Alex.
Lurking. So for those of you who didn't see, there's actually, I think it was a heron. I'm not I guess that's an ornithologist. But if we look at that and we do zoom in, you can actually see the bird. Now, the thing here is that a lot of times disruptions and signals are right in front of our faces, but we just don't see them. We're not looking. We're not taking different perspectives. We're thinking what we expect to see. And if the bird's not something you expect, if it's not something you're looking for, if you're not able to zoom in and zoom out. So, that's really important. And if you see differently and you start to think about the frame differently and what you're seeing, that can make a huge difference. So the next part of this is about being prepared and resilient. So if you see in the center of the screen, sorry for those people who have arachnophobia, but that's one of the famous Joros spiders. The Joros spiders build webs that can be 10 to 12 feet wide. They're anchored at different points to the trees, to the bushes. The webs are very strong. As you can see, there are leaves stuck in the web, and the web is resilient. It goes back and forth. You can literally throw a stick and it'll stick there. So that preparedness and resilience is what ensures the spider gets breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The other thing that's important to do on top of see, think, and do differently and being prepared and resilient is the importance of both and thinking. So all too often we're forced to make choices. I need this or that. You can have this or that. But in reality, in today's world, very often we need to do both. So Amazon didn't say you can have low prices or fast delivery. It's pick two. And we all know the story about Reese's peanut butter cup. So being able to do this and have both and being able to balance tensions is so important. So when we think about it, with all this disruption, with all this uncertainty, new leadership capabilities are needed to thrive. We can't go back to the old way of thinking. A lot of the old ways, which might have made us successful in the past, are not necessarily sufficient to deal with all of the disruptions today. So I developed, designed the 5 leadership superpowers to address those very tensions. And you'll see they're based on both and thinking. The first one is being a present futurist. So someone who can balance the needs of the present as well as looking towards the future. The second is being an experienced learner. And the third is being a prepared risk taker. So balancing preparedness and risk taking. Fourth is being a strategic executor. So balancing strategy and operations. And fifth is being an accountable collaborator. So I'm going to dive into each one, but I kind of wanted to lay out the picture of the 5 superpowers. So the first one I'm going to talk about is present futurist. And excuse me. So with present futurists, you see Ukraine highlighted and the Ukraine flag. So most of us, when we saw everything happening, it almost seemed like it was in slow motion that the war started. We saw the reporting, we saw a little bit of a lead up to it. But in a way, we were kind of surprised. How was this happening? Why was this happening? But recently, I met a retired 3-star general, and I was talking to him about Ukraine and just how people were surprised and how it seemed to escalate really quickly. And his comment was, we've been watching this for years. Going back, he said, even before when the Russians took over Crimea. This is something we've been monitoring. We have sensors, we get intelligence, we see satellite information. And we're always wargaming things out. What might happen? Who would need to come together? How, talking with our allies in advance and laying out different scenarios. So it's important to be a present futurist. And when we think about a present futurist, let's talk about a few of the capabilities. One is maintaining a robust understanding of the present, looking at things from different perspectives. Employees, customers, community, your various stakeholders. It's very important to have that robust picture. Second is to practice what I'll call foresight, looking at trends. What can you anticipate? What can you foresee? It's important to look at signals. Most times when there's some sort of crisis or disruption, there's some signal that retrospectively we say, why didn't I see that? I should have saw that. I should have been looking for that. It's also about envisioning where you're going in the future. Having that destination in mind that you're steering towards and being able to synthesize that information together. So if you're doing that, you're going to be better at anticipating, what's happening. You're going to be surprised less because you're looking more. You're going to, not have all that uncertainty. That uncertainty is always there. But because you're looking and you're getting more information, it's reduced. And because you're doing that, you're going to be able to act faster. You're going to have more informed decisions. So that's present futurist. The next one is experienced learner. And when we talk about an experienced learner, it's really about balancing experience and expertise with the need to be curious and the need to learn. Because our experience and expertise is not enough. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about WD-40. So I'm going to guess that most of us have a cannabis somewhere in our house or in our garage. Gary Rage, pictured below, recently retired after 30 years as CEO of WD-40. Gary is well known for building a culture that focused on learning and teamwork and collaboration, coming together. Gary and the leadership team banned the word failure. They have learning moments at WD-40. And interestingly enough, the name WD-40, it was the 40th attempt at that formulation until they got it right. So they had 39 learning moments before they got there. And if they looked at those learning moments as failures and stopped at any point, we would not have WD-40. So at WD-40, you can see the Maniac's Pledge there. And I'll give you a second to look at that. So, it says, I'm responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I'm responsible for asking. And I can't be offended if I didn't get this sooner. And if I know something that other people need to know, I'm responsible for telling them. So learning isn't something that people do for you. It's something you must do yourself. And again, you might have a lot of experience and expertise, but it's important to ask, is that still relevant? And to be open, to be curious. So if you're an experienced learner, some things that you're going to do, as I mentioned, you're going to leverage, but still challenge your experience and what you know. As a leader, you're going to welcome debate. It's okay if people challenge you. You need to be open to learning. You need to ask questions and show that curiosity. It's important to invite and engage others, not just leaders. There are people throughout the organization who very often are not listened to because maybe they're on the front line, maybe they're not as senior. You want to welcome that diversity of opinion from different areas of the company, from your partners. Being open to that gives you a lot more information. And, as I had a client tell me one time, there's nothing worse than bad news late. And if you're not asking questions, and if you're not making it safe for people to give you that information, you're going to get in trouble. So it's about learning continuously. It's not, oh, I'm a VP or I'm an SVP. I don't need training anymore. That's for the other people. No. Throughout your life, throughout your career, it's important to learn continuously. And it's also about improving learning capabilities. Not everything's going to be in the classroom. Some things are going to be online. Some things are going to be on the job. Some things you're going to need to read about. And when you're an experienced learner, you're better able to understand the challenges, the diversity of challenges that you're facing. You're going to have greater psychological safety. If you're welcoming this, that's going to build trust and engagement. And if you're a learning organization, you're going to be able to respond and adapt faster. You're not going to fear disruptions and change. You're not going to run the other way. You're not going to, hide under the desk, so to speak. You're going to embrace that challenge and be ready to act. The next one is being a prepared risk taker. So I'm going to go back to Sully Sullenberger again. And, I guess it was, I was reading about this last evening. So it was January 15th, 2009. This was a flight that was supposed to go from New York to Charlotte and then on to Seattle. So at 3:24, he got clearance to take off. And they raced down the runway. At 3:27, less than 3 minutes later, two loud bang, bang, both engines had blown out. Initially, he had been told to return to LaGuardia, and his response was unable. They were trying to start the engines, that wouldn't work. They were faced with an unprecedented situation, not something they had been particularly trained for. So they had to think quickly. Again, he was a captain. He and the co-pilot took charge. They thought about what were the different airports, and they quickly said, Teterboro, which was a little further in New Jersey, said, I can't make it. They knew they couldn't go back to LaGuardia. And Sully said, in the Hudson. And air traffic controllers were like bewildered. What do you mean he's going to go in the Hudson? But he was thinking about this, and he knew it was a risk to land the plane in the Hudson. But he had been a glider pilot and said, well, as long as we keep having forward motion, which they had as they were descending, they had that speed. He knew we could land it like a glider. He chose the Hudson because they wouldn't be hitting any civilians. It was, you had boats on both sides, ferries, rescue vehicles could converge on the plane. So in that way, he was prepared, and he knew he had to take the risk. That was the only way to get the 155 people saved. And they ditched at 3:31. So that entire thing, that flight was about 4 minutes. And by 3:55, every passenger was off the plane. So pretty amazing miracle when you think about it. And that's being a prepared risk taker in a very condensed moment. Now, most of us have a lot more time to prepare for the risks and the disruptions we face. So a prepared risk taker, they're improving their understanding of risk. They look at risk holistically. So it's not just one risk, it's how do these different risks interact? If you think in the case of Ukraine, you have fuel prices, you had grain prices, you had a refugee crisis. All these different things were going on at the same time while the world was still fighting COVID in supply chain disruptions. It's about increasing preparedness. Now, you can't be prepared for every single risk, but you can be better prepared. If you think about it, at home, you have a carbon monoxide detector, smoke detector. If everyone can make sure they're on mute, I'm just hearing a little bit of background noise. You have smoke detectors, fire extinguishers. My home's 2 stories. A lot of people who have multi-story homes or in high rises, they have evacuation plans to get out in the case of an emergency. So we have to think about, what does that mean for a company? And if you're doing that, you're going to be able to make faster, risk-informed decisions and act. And you can also think about taking those smart risks, whether it's landing in the Hudson because there are rescue boats nearby, or it's placing a small bet, doing an experiment. When you're a prepared risk taker, you're able to play offense while everybody else is playing defense. Focusing only on loss avoidance and not on opportunities is not going to help you. And if you're prepared, you're going to be able to absorb the shock. You're going to be able to absorb the shock, respond versus react. So it's not emotional. You can think about this. You're able to recover and you're able to accelerate forward. And accelerating forward is important because you're going to get to opportunities faster, pounce on them, and amplify your upside. At the same time, you're dampening your downside risk. And by being prepared, you've lowered your risk profile. So let me pause there for a moment and see if there are any questions.
So there's been some fantastic chat, and I see that everybody's eyes are back and forth with your awesome presentation as well as the chat. I mean, I can't believe how many believers we have in here, and it's just so refreshing. Lots of control and command, boo, right? And carrot and stick leadership, boo, right? And so many people just loving how deeply you took the story with Sully Sullenberg and the pilot. And actually, Alex Sharp had a comment. He wanted to understand more of the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup story. So if you have 2 seconds to share that, a few people have mentioned they don't know the story.
Well, if you remember, and I'm thinking back to the commercial, you had the person walking with the chocolate and the person walking with the peanut butter. They collided and they came together. But I think the thing that's interesting with Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, it's not chocolate blended with peanut butter. You still have the distinctness of the chocolate and the peanut butter together. So it's that combination of both and, because you're not mixing a certain way or doing a little bit of one versus the other. It's both together. All right, so let's move on to the next superpower. So the next superpower is strategic executor. And for that, I'm going to use our hometown airline. Now, when COVID hit, literally within a week or two, airlines lost 95% of their business just out the door. Everybody was in lockdown. People weren't traveling. It wasn't safe to be on planes. Excuse me. And airlines were, starting to mothball planes. They were terminating and laying off employees, seemingly not thinking about their employees, not being as concerned as they should be about customers. Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta, was different. Probably about a week or two in, he announced to employees, I don't recall if it was an email or a video, but the essence of the message was, we have 3 priorities. The first one is to take care of our customers and our employees. Their safety is paramount. The second thing he said is we need to protect cash. We don't know how long this is going to go on. We need to preserve our resources so we can weather this crisis, this event. Well, it wasn't an event. It ended up being, a lot more longer lasting. The third thing was really what differentiated Delta. And he said it's just as important to protect our future. And in doing so, in talking about the future, excuse me, he made sure that they furloughed instead of laid off employees. They didn't get rid of all of the planes. They, kept communications open. They were transparent. In fact, during that time, Delta's engagement scores for employees actually went up, which was unheard of compared to other airlines. And when travel started to come back, Delta came back first and much more successfully than the others because of the relationship they had with their employees. That doesn't mean things were perfect. And yes, they've run into some of the same issues in terms of staffing, storms as things have since unfolded, but they did much better than any of the other airlines. So when we think about a strategic executor, they're managing and making decisions, knowing that strategy and execution are linked. You can't talk about one without the other. Strategy without execution is a pipe dream. And execution without strategy is a lot of busyness. Like Bastian did, they consider their implications before making operational or strategic decisions. So you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. They're aligning decisions around execution, where they make investments, what they focus on with their strategy. And they recognize that it is important to adapt strategy. You can't just set it, walk away, and come back to it another year later. You have to adapt and adjust so you can thrive in that dynamic environment. And that, again, that's an ongoing thing. Now, if you're doing that, you're maintaining your focus on your strategy so you know directionally where you're going. You're going to make better decisions because you're balancing the needs of short and long term. I think what's critical is you're more responsive. You can be thoughtful in terms of what you do and the steps you take versus being emotionally reactive, doing things quick without thinking, which very often can be detrimental to you in the long term. And because you're doing this, you're going to get a greater return on your strategy. So if a strategy is supposed to, let's just say, make $100 million in value for the company, if you're not doing this, maybe you get 60 million. But if you're doing this, you're going to get 85. So you're leaving less money on the table. The last superpower I want to talk about is being an accountable collaborator. And for that, I want to share a short video. You'll notice in white is the US women's soccer team, and blue is the German soccer team. So let's just watch this short clip. So, what we saw there was great teamwork, no matter what was happening. People were moving around, adjusting their positions. They were collaborating together with one purpose, and that was to score a goal and to win the game. And if you notice, there were no heroes. It was the team. It wasn't an individual, and that team came together because of that teamwork. So when we talk about being an accountable collaborator, that's someone who collaborates across boundaries, across functions, across organizational lines, because they know that type of team to bring the right skills to bear, the right capabilities, people who are focused on the right stakeholders, is all about collaboration. Next, it's about focusing the team on delivering and being accountable for outcomes. The team is focused on winning the game. That's the outcome. Nobody's worrying about who has the ball more or who kicked it the most. The team supports each other, and the team holds each other accountable for their roles. And I think the big difference here is forming fluid, fit-for-purpose teams. So when a company has a challenge, an organization has a challenge, it's about forming fit for purpose. So who are the right people? Don't worry about level. Who are the people who have the capabilities, the knowledge, the skills to solve that challenge? And that team comes together. They're focused on that outcome. They have some autonomy. They can work outside of the organizational structure to accomplish the mission. Then the team disbands. And maybe for the next crisis or the next disruption, another team comes together. So it's that fluidity and flexibility that makes all the difference. So that's the 5 superpowers. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, that's an awful lot for one person, for a leader to do. And I think, we should think about this. A leader is probably going to be or should be proficient in 1 to 3. Depending on your role, depending on that person's experience. But when you think about a leadership team, whether that be at an enterprise, a business unit, or functional level, or even, major initiative, you want representation for all 5. So that way there are no blind spots. People are asking the right questions. They're thinking about what the environment is like going forward. So you're probably wondering, well, where do I apply the superpowers? How do I incorporate this into the rhythm of the organization? And personally, I think first of all is having a lot of these capabilities, the superpowers, helps you manage and adapt your strategy to reflect what's going on around you and what you expect. I think it's critical for board and the C-suite relationships. So first of all, boards can no longer just, be rubber stamps. They have to be looking more at risk. They have to be asking questions about it. Is their company prepared? Are we building a leadership bench with the superpowers? It's also incumbent on leaders in the C-suite to be adapting and building those superpowers so they can build the confidence that the board has in them so they can be better prepared, more resilient, and more successful. The superpowers should be integrated into decision-making. If somebody's asking, well, are we sure this is going to work in the future? What if this happens? Or what capabilities do we need? What questions should we be asking? So the superpowers come into play. It's also relevant for leadership development. You want to develop leaders that have the superpowers. So high potentials, even existing leaders can benefit from training. Recruiting and hiring. So when you're looking for different leaders, you want to incorporate some of those capabilities from the superpowers. Are they capable of leading in disruption and uncertainty? And if you're a candidate and you're in transition, how can you position yourself and show that you have these important capabilities? So the superpowers, when they're working together, they support and inform one another. And that leads to exponentially better results because of the multiplicative impact. And when you do that, you can see the benefits. We've talked about these, about better understanding the present and foreseeing the future, about having critical capabilities, about being future fit, improving preparedness. And when you think about results, we've already talked about dampening downside risk and amplifying your upside return because you recover faster and you can accelerate forward. It's also about increasing value for stakeholders. For employees, it's a better place to work. It's some place where they can be engaged, where they're respected, they're treated fairly. Customers benefit because they're served better. They're better understood, and the focus is on them. It's also looking at stakeholders, the community, the environment, and also shareholders. It's not one or the other. It's got to be and for all of these. And you're increasing your probability of success. So you're probably wondering, well, this sounds like a lot of work. What do I do from here? So, becoming a superpowered organization does take effort. Leadership does need to be involved. It's a journey, but it's not something you can hire a training company to do for you or hire an outside team. So you can't outsource it. You have to do it in your organization, but you don't have to do it alone. So there are three ways to kickstart the journey in areas where I can help. One is about introducing the superpowers into your company. So I do keynote talks, executive briefings, ways of helping explain this in the organization, introduce the concepts, talk about the benefits. It's also about exploring the training offerings. So, once you start to learn, it's, having an interactive presentation and exercises where your executives can start to experience the power of the superpowers and how that allows them to think differently. But it's also comprehensive training programs to, take a leadership team over the course of 2 days through each of the superpowers and get very tactical. What will you do differently? If you're a present futurist, what does this mean? Where do you look? What sources do you go to? What steps do you take? And third is, assessing the future readiness of your organization. Just like you took the survey in the beginning and 80% of you were unsure or disagreed that your company was prepared for the future, it helps to understand where you are so that you can then target your efforts. So for everyone here, I'm offering a free discovery call, and you see the link to my calendar that will be put in chat. You can contact me on email, and connect with me, please, if we're not connected on LinkedIn. And with that, I will turn it back to our wonderful host, Dana.
Fabulous, fabulous. Can we get a round of applause for Jay Weiser, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone who is here today? Fabulous. Look at that. They love it. I loved it. We have so many questions. My contact information and Veronica and I co-founders of Hive Talent Acquisition Firm. Just really quick, we are your hosts today. We are human resources consultants out of Sandy Springs, Atlanta, Georgia. And here's our contact information quickly for you as well. But let's get to some questions. The chat is blowing up and I'm getting multiple private messages from people. So let's start with Ashley. Ashley, are you still here? Please share your question because it has disappeared in the chat and I'm still currently looking for it.
Hi, Dana. Yeah, it was just a question, and Jay kind of answered this on his last slide, but essentially is what's the way, I kind of sit below that C-suite of leadership, and they're very experienced. I work for a small biotech, and they have decades of experience ahead of me, but what's the best way or some strategies to kind of manage up to that level and try to incorporate some of this? Because I do believe as a company, they really embody a lot of this already. I'm fortunate for that, but there are ways that we could improve as we grow our organization, because that's what we're looking to do.
So I think first of all, it's working in your immediate area, talking with your boss, showing that you have these capabilities. So, in terms of looking towards the future or skills that you think you need to build, it's asking questions. So if you think something's not being addressed, being able to say, well, can you explain that to me? Why is that? Versus, barging in and saying, hey, I think I know the way to do it. If you're more of a junior person, that can be a little risky. But if you do it by asking questions, I think that can be really helpful. And I think it's also, taking content like this and sharing it with the other people in your organization and say, I heard this really interesting presentation, here's a model. Maybe this is something we can talk about. And, that's a way of introducing that. So thanks for that great question.
Thank you.
Claudio, you had a great question again, having a difficult time finding it in the chat. Do you recall? Please unmute yourself.
Yes, my point here is those are exceptional concepts, and I loved what you put together, Jay. The thing is, that keeps coming back to my mind is how do you develop these superpowers? We all know that behavior is malleable, but for one to change, it requires a lot of determination and deliberate practice. So I guess training is the general answer, but there's any specific activities or routes that you would recommend that we take?
Sure. So I think a couple of things come into play. The superpowers are very contextual in terms of the situation you're in, the company you're in, and depending on your role. So I think part of this is identifying actions, tactics that you can take. So if we're talking about, being a prepared risk taker, how do we look at risk? Where should we look? So actual steps, do we build a list of risks? Do we ask for input? Risk management isn't just something that's done at the top. So how do we get input from employees about the risks that they see? Now, it's also, there are skills, having a mindset that's more open. And some of these things, it's about building that awareness. It's identifying if there are specific competencies about asking questions, analytical skills, critical thinking that are all important to this. So thanks for that great question.
Anyone else, please feel free to unmute yourself. Welcome. Hello. Introduce yourself and ask Jay a question at this point. And Jay, if you wouldn't mind also, I'd love to get a group shot. If you could unshare for just a second, that'd be amazing. Perfect.
There we go. Now we can see everybody.
I see your smiling faces. I see your smiling faces. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Y'all rock. Thank you so much.
So what other questions, concerns do people have?
I'd love you to elaborate on the more you train this out and how you actually facilitate something like that, right? clearly these organizations and these management and these groups need to get with you, set up a call, but also really put a plan in place, right? You know, we have 4 quarters in the year. So how about a training a quarter? Keep it moving. I see a lot of heads nodding right now. We have a lot of HR people, a lot of recruiters, a lot of management here. So what do you think? What do you say to that, Jay?
So, I think the pace is, really what works for you. Obviously, sooner the better. This can be done in individual modules, so kind of taking people through, understanding the environment, thinking about some of those key principles we talked about, and then working through each of the superpowers. So, doing this when you're using your own company's information. So that way it's not just general and conceptual. It's okay, if I'm in Delta Airlines, what do I need to think about in terms of the present and future? What are the drivers of my performance? If we're thinking about what experience, what things do we need to unlearn because they don't work anymore? Traditions that we have, the way we filled out forms that maybe make no sense, and changing that. So a lot of this is specific to the company. And how that principle, how that capability applies in your organization. And not every superpower is going to be as important at any one particular time. But ultimately, you do want to have that awareness of all of them.
Awesome. Claudio, you got another really great comment from Scott. Is it Scott? Bodie? Just want to make sure. Go ahead. Is it Scott Bodie? Yes. Awesome. Scott Bodie, everyone. He mentioned it would also recommend daily writing about your experiences. How many people journal? I do. Absolutely. I see a lot of hands popping up. Big journaling, right? Journal. Any manifestations, any meditators in here? I'm a huge meditation person. See a lot of hands. Yes. These are all the things. Yep. I see. Thank you, Gladys. Yes. I see a lot of hands. So Jay, did you want to make a comment on all of those as well?
Sure. So I think, jotting things down, what you learn, what you're observing, an idea that you have that you can then build on, later in the day, I think is really important. There are going to be, you talk about learning moments. We all have those in the course of the day. Coming out of the meeting, we might reflect on the meeting and say, can we spend a lot of time on something that really wasn't valuable because we do it in every meeting, and maybe this is something we need to stop. Or maybe as a leader, you're like, well, maybe I was too quick to dismiss that question or that issue that was raised. And if we're trying to promote that psychological safety, we want people to be engaged. I need to kind of rein myself in, because maybe I have a tendency to make a harsh comment sometimes, and that will prevent people from speaking. So I think that's very important to reflect and be self-aware and be aware in general.
I love it. I love it. Scott made one last comment about, from human resources perspective, for all us human resources folks on today, right, or people who are involved, right? What's happening with our people now that wasn't, and that we were up against or weren't up against 2 years ago, right? Because things change so quickly. Well said, Scott. And then Jonathan Dunnett had a great one. We're all going to die a little bit inside with this, but it means what it means, and it's important, right? The most expensive words in business, folks, because we've always done it this way. Ugh. Right? Like, just nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Move forward. Don't stay as is. That's a very, pardon me, because a lot of us on here today are in fact old white men, but let's go ahead and just say that's a very old white male corporate mentality, right? Don't stick with what we've always done. Move forward, grow together.
And I think that's really where the curiosity comes in. If we think about it, we were most curious when we were kids, when we were growing up. We asked questions. And we also, unfortunately, were forced to make choices sometimes. Our parents said you could do this or that. You could get this toy or that toy. people ask, what do you want to be? You want to be a fireman or an astronaut? If you said you wanted to be an astronaut, who is a fireman? People kind of looked at you cross-eyed and said, no, you can be one or the other. And because of that, we have to step back now and take the time to say, can we do both? What might that look like? And that goes back to the both and thinking. And having that curiosity and asking questions is so important to learning now. It's no longer, well, gee, if he asked a question, he must not understand something, so that's bad. No, asking a question is good. Especially coming in with, a clear set of eyes who's maybe not tempered by past experience with the organization can really be helpful. So we have time for one more question.
We don't have any questions that I see in the chat. So if anyone had something they'd like to ask, please feel free to unmute yourself. Fabulous. Just fabulous time with all of you. Thank you so much for coming. We are so grateful to have had you today. Quick little training. If you want to completely save the chat for the networking aspects and comments, etc., in case you've never done it before, go down to where it says 2, go across to the 3 dots on the more, and you have the option of saving the chat. And you are welcome in case you didn't know that. And we hope that you join us again. So sorry, please continue, Jay.
Yeah, no, I was just going to thank everybody. We had close to 120 folks sign up to this, 13 countries, multiple time zones. I really appreciate everyone's attention. And, I was serious about what I said, and that is offering a complimentary discovery call for those who are interested, whether it's at an individual level, how do you become a superpowered leader, and how do you do this in your organization? If you know of other folks that this would help, please refer them to me. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, there's a lot of content there. And if you email me or if you email Dana, and you'd like a link, this has been recorded. So that way, if you want to share it with a boss, a coworker, or have it as a reference, you're able to do that. You just need to reach out to us. So thank you again. Have a great Valentine's Day and a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.